Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the two-man power trip of wrestling. I'm your host, JP John Poz, right here in the two-man power trip podcasting empire, part of the TMPT feed. I'm the one-man power trip that runs the two-man power trip here each and every week on the show. We're going to be talking about some random topics, and lately, of course, it's all been about Hulk Hogan, Hulkamania, and even recently, we were talking about his dream matches and dream matches that never kind of came to fruition. Some dream matches that were supposed to happen that didn't quite happen. And, we're talking about different guys and different wrestlers maybe that he really should have wrestled that didn't wrestle either. That how the hell did this match not happen when it was supposed to happen? And we'll delve into that a little bit as well. But here on the show, interesting thing I want to point out here, a few fans wrote in and a few comments wrote in about some other dream matches, and it kind of sparked my interest in saying, like, yeah, I talked about the top 10 dream matches, but man, did I leave off arguably 10 other dream matches that should have happened with the Hulkster. So definitely for sure missed some dream matches, and there's no doubt about it. So let's get into it right now, and let's talk about the part two, the 10 dream matches that I perhaps forgot or didn't mention, or somebody wrote into me and said, hey, what about this dream match? So let's continue on and let's talk about it. Let's go on and talk about maybe you could say 11 through 20 of dream matches, or maybe the next top 10 or part two of the Hulk Hogan dream matches. But here we go. Number one here, or maybe even number 10. We'll go from the bottom up here. Seth freaking Rollins. Yes, Seth Rollins has not been too kind to the Hulkster, and this is one of those interesting dream matches that could have, should have went because, obviously Rollins had that match with Sting more than 10 years ago, and everyone kind of thought Sting didn't have a lot left in the tank, but boy, did he, and he proved that with his AEW run. But it's one of those things where Rollins can take a lot of big bumps. He can definitely get a lot of mileage out of the Hulkster if it was Hulk in his advanced career, and he would bump like crazy for the Hulkster. So this is one of those dream matches, and that's something that a fan did actually run into me and said, what about Seth Rollins? Because there were 11 Seth Rollins. Maybe he's not the top of the card guy like, for instance, a Roman Reigns is right now, or a Cody Rhodes, or a CM Punk, but Rollins is in that tier right below those guys, and this would have been a good match because Rollins would have bumped like crazy for him. But it also makes it more interesting just because Rollins has said so many nasty things about the Hulkster in the past, and was not too kind to the Hulkster. So that kind of sparked a lot of interest, not only me, but in some fans in mentioning Seth Rollins and how that would kind of be an interesting matchup just for the fact that there was some real life heat between them. And then to throw out there as well, Hulk was very complimentary about Rollins, and he would have loved to work him. He's a great worker. He's a great wrestler. So interesting dichotomy there. Hulk very positive about Rollins, and Rollins was not too positive about the Hulkster as far as some comments that he has made in the past. All right, so let's talk about another guy. Kind of should have happened, but it didn't. And remember when the Hulkster had that run in TNA wrestling, and it was all about that Hall of Fame ring brother and Abyss, and that ends up being a swerve, and Abyss is a heel with the Hulkster, but initially they were two baby faces together. This was one of those things where you thought that's where it was leading to in TNA wrestling in that run in the late 2000s with Hulkster and TNA wrestling, obviously going into 2010 as well, but you thought that the whole thing and that it was all building up and leading up to Hulk Hogan and Abyss going one-on-one. So it's interesting that it never happened. It's kind of one of those curious cases of, well, what the hell happened there and why didn't it happen? And what kind of led to it not happening? It kind of didn't really make sense as far as the booking was. Yeah, they ended up together, but then you can, split them up and then they could, have their feud. And that all seemed like it was logical and kind of, I don't know, headed in that direction for sure. So that's one of the curious cases of why didn't it happen as far as Hogan and Abyss. Great thing though is you get a lot of funny things, and I know me and my buddies always talk about this. Joseph Parks' brother, and him always calling him Joseph Parks, and even though it's Joseph Park, and Park and all that funny stuff with Abyss, kind of proving that he's got some range as a character there. But Hogan obviously a little over the top there with Joseph Parks' brother. But why didn't Hogan and Abyss happen? Should have. Next up is one that was actually teased. If you remember this, we talked about this last week as far as the dream matches were concerned, but this was actually teased and thrown out there and put out there as a possibility. And when you look at it, it's one of the things that you want to say, well, you teased it, and obviously you put the breadcrumb out there. Why didn't it happen? Should it have happened? And kind of one of those things where it definitely should have happened. So if you remember back to the 15th anniversary of Raw, December 10th, 2007. There was a showdown, if you will, and you can see in the picture, and Hogan points at him, and then Khali's yelling at him. So it kind of should have happened, and it didn't happen. I mean, and this encounter kind of proved that they were teasing it, and at least throwing it out there for a possible Hulkamania replay of Hogan versus a Giant, WrestleMania 3, Hogan versus Andre, Hogan versus Khali, and it doesn't happen. And you might think you might get a creation of the Slam heard around the world with Hogan and Andre. So this was kind of funny just because, and you could throw it out there, obviously, with the same thing with the Giant Gonzalez as well, like this big dream match that they teased because of the formula, Hogan versus a Giant, Hogan versus a monster, and this seemed like the good direction that you could go to, and this would just be an attraction for WrestleMania, just an added throw in for WrestleMania, just make it just a little bit more intriguing and interesting. It doesn't happen. So Khali and Hogan never happens, but they teased it at the 15th anniversary of Raw back in December. And really, if you think about it, they kind of went into a different direction where Kane wrestled Khali at WrestleMania and Kane slams him. They kind of relived the Hogan Andre slam in that direction, but it's not the same. Obviously, you want Hogan, great Khali, this giant, this 7'2" monster. So it didn't work out, but it would have been one of those cool what ifs, just like Giant Gonzalez. It kind of would have been cool. Maybe match quality wise would have been cool, great, but I feel like the fans would have been super, super into it as well. Here's another one that a bunch of fans told me, and even my buddy messaged me. He said, "Hey, what about AJ Styles?" So Hogan versus AJ Styles, and you think when and where could have happened? Obviously, TNA wrestling. Yes, they did wrestle in tag matches in TNA, but they did not have any one-on-one encounters, which you kind of also thought they were leading to with Hogan in TNA. So Hogan's TNA run is interesting. They used him a lot. He wrestled, sparingly, but they could have used him more. Why didn't they use him more? I mean, he had a big match against Sting, but why didn't he wrestle some of the younger guys and maybe put one of the younger guys over? Who knows about the booking and what was going on in TNA wrestling at that point? But Hogan and Abyss versus Flair and AJ happened a few times. So why wouldn't they do the natural thing of Hogan versus AJ, where Hogan can really bump around a lot for Hogan, and AJ could really, make Hogan look like $1 million. Again, like I said, with the Hulk Hogan and Seth Rollins, like obviously AJ Styles more than capable of carrying an older Hulk Hogan to a good match. He would make him look like $1 million. He really would, obviously bump around like a madman for him too. So it's one of those things too. And booking wise, it seemed like it was headed in that direction. Why did they not have that match? Yes, they had that tag match, technically two tag matches in 2010. Then Sting was really his only one-on-one match in 2011, and then Hogan had those two six-man tags out there in England in 2012. But that was it. Hogan should have wrestled more, and this should have been one of the big primetime TNA matches. Next up is one that 100% should have happened, and I have no idea why it didn't. Steiner has said that it's because Hogan didn't want to wrestle him. He didn't want to work with him. He maybe feared him a bit just because he was kind of off the rails a bit. I don't know if that's 100% true or not, but Hogan Steiner should have happened in WCW, whether it was for Steiner kind of taking control of the NWO, whether it was for Steiner getting that next big push, whether it was even later on than that when you had the New Blood era going on, and instead of feuding with Billy Kidman, why wouldn't Hogan feud with Scott Steiner, the next big gun, the next big guy? You could arguably say he's not really a New Blood, but he was a strong heel. So you could easily just put him a part of New Blood and say he never got that push that he deserved and kind of blame Hogan and go in that direction. So that's another one of the weird ones that never happened. It really should have happened. I honestly have no idea. Like it has to be. And I mean, maybe it's a little obvious, but it has to be because of politics. There's like kind of no if, and, or buts about it. There's no iffiness, if you will. I mean, that just has to be it. It had to be politics at play because this would have been a huge primetime matchup in WCW. Would have gave Hogan another great opponent to work with. Would have been great for Steiner to go over Hogan, possibly. Obviously, Hogan and WCW did put over a bunch of guys. He put over DDP, obviously, in a different form or fashion, but in one-on-one match, put over Sting, put over Luger, put over Goldberg. He's putting over a lot of different guys. I feel like, why not Scott Steiner? He would have been the perfect guy at the perfect opportunity, and it really launched him to the next stratosphere. Eventually, he kind of gets there on his own, but I feel like this is a feud that they definitely missed on. Bischoff definitely missed on it, and Russo definitely missed on it. Whether you want to talk about it should happen in 98, should happen in 99, or should happen in 2000 with the New Blood, but this feud should have happened. Hogan and Scott Steiner should have happened. Next up is one that is a weird one. And it just, to me, I can't believe I missed this one or forgot to mention this one. It kind of just strange that this one never really happened. And that Hogan and Bam Bam Bigelow. You figure the monster, the big man, would have been perfect for a 1980 style feud with the Hulkster. But obviously, when Bam Bam goes in there and into the WWF, he's a babyface. So he's a part of the 1987 Hogan Survivor Series team, which ends up losing to Andre the Giant. He, of course, teams with Hogan quite a bunch. And, there's an infamous MSG match in 88, the beginning of 88, Hogan and Bam Bam versus DiBiase and Virgil, which is quite good. There's another great match in Philly that aired on TV, a part of the Philly Spectrum, a part of the Prism Network, and the Nesson Network. It was back-to-back on the same day. So if you could find those, you could probably find them on YouTube. It's Hogan and Bam Bam defeating Andre and DiBiase twice in one day on two different television shows. So you got Nesson in Boston and Prism Network in Philly. Hogan and Bam Bam would team a bunch and defeat Andre DiBiase on a ton of house shows. They also would defeat DiBiase and Virgil again on television. And then, of course, Hogan and Bam Bam would meet again in WCW, never have a one-on-one match. They were in a battle royal together in WCW, which is a great battle royal, and they were in a 2-on-3 handicap match where Hogan and Goldberg defeated the Jersey Triad of Bigelow, DDP, and Canyon. So that's not necessarily a one-on-one match or a big match, but they had wrestled before, and obviously they teamed a lot before. But this is a weird one. This would have been an awesome marquee, you want to say WrestleMania-esque or a pay-per-view-esque pay-per-view main event. This would have been it. Hogan, Bam Bam. Just imagine the poster. Bretta would have been great to have Hogan and Bigelow go one-on-one. It kind of doesn't make sense that it did. Obviously, some politics reared its head as far as Bigelow leaving WWF, but he was a babyface at the time. Really should have been heel, and it should have been Bam Bam versus Hulk Hogan somehow, some way in WWF. Next up is an interesting one because it happened a lot, but it didn't happen when it was supposed to happen. And we talked about this the last week when we were talking about Bret Hart in SummerSlam 1993 and how it should have happened. Well, this was announced. So this is one of the dream matches, especially at the time, where you would have figured it would have happened. Hogan, Flair, they wrestled everywhere, headlined everywhere, made a ton of money everywhere, but just not headlining WrestleMania. Kind of a weird thing, kind of an odd thing. Not really too keen on it not happening, but we did get a great Flair Savage match. And obviously we got the big Hogan Sid main event, which turns into a Warrior return at WrestleMania 8. But Hogan versus Flair not happening at WrestleMania 8 was kind of crazy, considering they basically announced at a huge press conference where Hogan's pulling the original Yes movement. He's the original yes, as he's announced as the next contender for Ric Flair's WWF World Heavyweight Championship. It doesn't happen. We get a lot of mixed reviews there about what's happening. It seemed to be pushing with Hogan and Sid at the Royal Rumble, and then Flair and Savage having their feud. So it does make sense, however, doing this and not having the split. But why announce it? Why put it out there? And I used to do a podcast with J.J. Dillon of the J.J. Dillon podcast. We talked about this because obviously he was booking the WWF at this time, and he said the returns weren't that great. But so I threw out there, well, why did you have so many half show matches with them and kind of waste it and not build it up more and really tease it? So I think it was bad booking. I think it was their fault of why it didn't happen, and it 100% should have happened. It's one of those weird things where, very rare for the time, if you announced a WrestleMania main event, that's the main event, and you would think the best wrestler in the NWA versus the best wrestler in the WWF WrestleMania main event would have done that for them, would have set it off. You would have thought yes, and that was the right direction to go, but no. They do not go in that direction. Obviously, we get Hogan, Sid, and Flair Savage double main event at WrestleMania 8. So a little bit of a what if there, and what could have been and what should have been. Next up is another match that was announced, but really maybe unbeknownst to a lot of fans, but it was announced in Japan. So the main event of the big WWF show in Japan, when you look at it, it was the WWF All Japan New Japan Wrestling Summit at the Tokyo Dome. It was on 4/13/1990. As you know, in front of 54,000 fans at the Tokyo Dome, the main event of the evening was Hulk Hogan defeating Stan Hansen in an awesome match, about 13-minute match there, but awesome match. Go out of your way to see that. One of the best Hogan matches for sure, and an awesome match from Hansen. But here's the interesting part. We're talking about Terry Gordy right now, and how this Hogan versus Terry Gordy would have been a dream match. Terry Gordy, arguably the best wrestler in the world in 1990, arguably the best wrestler in Japan in 1990, if you want to throw that out there as well. Just was awesome. Go back and watch his All Japan run during that run before he kind of breaks down, and we know the history of that. But when you look at it, Gordy was the man, and Hansen obviously was 1A to his 1B, or however you want to say it, but Hansen right up there with him, being an absolute legend and an absolute great worker, wrestler, star, superstar at that point in Japan. But Terry Gordy, as the story goes, did not want to do the job to the Hulkster. So this dream match between Hogan and Terry Gordy leads to another dream match with Hogan and Stan Hansen, although we get to see the Stan Hansen match. So one of those things where pretty damn amazing. I know Hansen did actually fight Hogan before, so it wasn't really necessarily the first time that they wrestled. They had wrestled in New Japan before. They wrestled in Georgia Championship Wrestling before, so it's not necessarily the first time. But as far as when they're both huge stars, this is a absolute dream match, and that it happens. But it's all because of the dream match with Terry Gordy that doesn't happen. So Terry Gordy didn't want to do the job. Stan Hansen would, and obviously Hulk Hogan beats Hansen in the main event of that huge Tokyo Dome show. So next up, we have another what it could have been. This was written in by actually one fan especially, but more than another fan messaged me about this as well. And they said, you missed Bruiser Brody. And I said, wow, you are 100% right. You are 100% correct. I can't believe I missed this one when I did the initial top 10 dream matches, although the original top 10 was pretty good. This list is pretty damn awesome as well. So Bruiser Brody, Hulk Hogan, would have been a huge dream match. It's one of those ones that I can't believe it didn't happen. I can't believe Brody didn't make his way to the WWF. Maybe he would have had he not passed away. These two obviously never wrestled. They never crossed paths. But the rumor was that King Kong Brody instead of King Kong Bundy could have been the WrestleMania 2 main event, and that was thrown out there. That was definitely one of the things when you look back at the time. Obviously, I was a little kid, and I absolutely hated Bundy, and he was broke Hogan's ribs and everything else. But when you look at the dirt sheets and the rumors and the speculation and the rumor mill that was going around out there at the time, you saw that Bruiser Brody was rumored, and that would have been a big Hogan opponent. Now, that's one of the things where he's a monster. He's a big guy. He fits right into the Hogan versus Monster. We're going to make a ton of money off this feud. We're going to make a ton of money off these guys. Fits perfectly. Obviously, Andre, Bundy, Stud, Kamala, One Man Gang, Boss Man, Killer Khan, all these gigantic guys that Hogan worked with and made a ton of money with. Brody would have fit perfectly in there. Maybe Brody better worker than all those guys for sure. He could have had better matches with Hogan. But I think that's a different story for today. We're talking about dream matches, making money. Hogan, Brody, put those two on the poster, put those two as far as building it. I think that would have been huge, would have been awesome. I know we got a great Hogan-Bundy feud, and we get a great Hogan-Bundy cage match, but imagine if the dream match was Hulk Hogan and Bruiser Brody in the main event of WrestleMania 2 instead. Would have been huge, for sure. Last, but certainly not least, and maybe the most interesting one to me, and one of the ones kind of a head-scratcher of how the hell did I forget this one, Nikita Koloff. Yes, the Russian nightmare, the Russian assassin himself. Obviously, Hogan and Nikita never crossed paths, but maybe they should have. In the 1980s, Russia, with the Cold War, Russia was the biggest villains in the world. Russia, there was so much heat with Russia. Would have been awesome if we would have gotten Hulk Hogan and Nikita Koloff. Imagine that. If obviously Nikita was very firm in NWA and a star and a Starrcade main event, and him and Dusty were a great tag team, just great stuff with him. Obviously, he's a great heel even before that. We're doing the Russian gimmick with Ivan, with Crusher Khrushchev. He was absolutely awesome. Just looked like a monster. Just looked like a beast. He was one of those guys you can just tell just by looking at this guy as the it factor. He almost played Ivan Drago and Rocky. This guy had the look, he had the ability, he had the star power, he had everything to be a big major player in wrestling. He's just a perfect 1980s style wrestler as well, just as far as that look and that build on him. So when you look at it, Hogan versus Nikita Koloff could have been a huge main event of the 80s, especially USA versus Russia. I know we got it with Hogan and Nikolai Volkov, but I feel like Hogan and Nikita Koloff would have and could have been even bigger and better, and that could have been for for sure a WrestleMania main event. So there you go. We're talking about Seth Rollins, talking about Abyss, talking about Great Khali, AJ Styles, Scotty Steiner, Bam Bam Bigelow, Ric Flair, WrestleMania 8, Terry Gordy should have happened in the Tokyo Dome 1990, Bruiser Brody could have happened at WrestleMania 2, and of course, Nikita Koloff could have been a WrestleMania main event. There's no doubt about that. So let's wrap this bad boy up and head towards the plugs. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Check out the website, patreon.com/TMPT Empire. And go to TeePublic, tpublic.com/stores/TMPT and get your Hogan era gear today. Also, check out Dashery, 2manpowertrip.dashery.com, and you get some more TMPT merch there. Also, check out the Hogan Era podcast, which airs each and every week on the TMPT feed. I'd like to thank everybody out there for listening, and please check out, coming soon, The Era of the Hitman, the new book via me and Johnny Snowden over at ECW Press. I'd like to thank everybody out there for listening. We'll see you right back here next week for the 2-Man Power Trip of Wrestling and the 2-Man Power Trip of Wrestling's podcasting empire. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next week, folks.